Welcome to the presentation. My name is Lily Lopez-McGee, and I am the Director for the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program. The program is a State Department-funded program and administered by Howard University. In today's presentation, we will walk through the details of the Thomas R. Pickering Graduate Fellowship Program, discuss the benefits about the program as well as the Foreign Service of the U.S. Department of State, and then we will spend some time walking through the application process, requirements, and expectations for what our committee is looking for in a competitive application. As I mentioned, the program is a U.S. Department of State funded program administered by Howard University, and the goal of the program is really to promote excellence and diversity in the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Service. The graduate program is really geared towards folks who have a strong interest in becoming Foreign Service officer generalists, because the program does culminate in employment with the U.S. Department of State. But before we get into the point of employment, let's walk through the different components of the program. So the Pickering program is focused and centered on the graduate fellowship component. So folks apply to the program at the time that they are also looking to apply to graduate school. We're looking for folks essentially a year before they are anticipating enrolling in a graduate program. So the program starts, and the core of the program is really the two-year master's program. So the Pickering Fellowship provides up to $37,500 in funding for each year towards a two-year graduate program at a U.S.-based institution in an area of relevance for the Foreign Service. So the way that the tuition breaks down is fellows receive up to $21,500 towards tuition and fees support, and then they receive a $16,000 stipend that is administered to them directly to support their costs of living, so room and board and that kind of thing. The programs that we're looking to support for the fellowship program include programs like international relations, public policy, business administration, and area and regional studies, or even communications. The types of programs that we're really hoping that our fellows will enroll in will help them become better Foreign Service officer generalists. The types of programs that we're not able to fund are ones that might be more technical in nature. So public health, urban planning, law degrees, all of those are much more narrow in focus, because our fellows will ultimately become Foreign Service officer generalists, and I'll get into a little bit more about what that means and what those folks do later. We are really looking for programs that will help build their knowledge of the world and management and policy in a broad way. And you can find a couple of different examples of the types of programs that we have funded in the past on our website. We are always, as staff, ready and prepared to discuss specific types of programs with applicants as they're going through the application process. So if there's ever a question as to whether or not the program is something that the Pickering Fellowship would be able to be applied to, we are certainly willing to discuss that with applicants on a case-by-case basis as well. Also, because the program is looking for people who are in the process of applying to programs, we're not expecting that everybody know exactly where it is that they're planning to go to school the following fall. And I'll get into exactly what the timeline looks like a little bit later on in the presentation. So the reason I mentioned that is because it's as folks are going through the application process, we also are working with the fellows after they've been awarded the program to work with them on identifying programs that will be in line with what the fellowship is required. So in addition to the graduate school component, which again is sort of the core of the fellowship program, the Pickering Fellowship provides a week-long in-depth orientation to the Foreign Service after fellows have been awarded the fellowship. So in mid-June, we fly all of our fellows out for an intense week-long orientation at the Department of State. where we introduce them to folks who have worked in the Foreign Service, who are working in the Foreign Service, who are working at the Department of State, and can speak to the experiences of all of the different types of work that Foreign Service officers can do. In addition to those types of activities that happen during the orientation, we're also preparing our fellows to receive mentorship. So one of the bullet points on here is mentorship by a Foreign Service officer. And during that orientation, our fellows will be assigned a mentor and meet with their mentor, and then hopefully begin to cultivate relationships where they can learn much more in depth about the types of career opportunities and career tracks that are available to them. In addition to the orientation, which happens again in mid-June, the summer before our fellows enter graduate school, there is a 10-week internship at the State Department in Washington, D.C., which happens between their first and second year of graduate school. These internships are really important in providing our fellows with an experience on the domestic side of the work that Foreign Service officers do. So they are embedded in regional and functional bureaus. We work very closely with the Department of State and the fellows to identify placements that are in line with fellows' interests, whether it's in a specific region or whether it's something that's more functional. So we have had folks who have worked in, for example, the Western Hemisphere Affairs Bureau. We have also had folks work in international narcotics and labor. So there are lots of different areas where our fellows are able to work in these 10-week internships. During the summer in between, after they've completed graduate school, so immediately following graduation, our fellows go on to do a 10-week overseas internship at a U.S. consulate or embassy. And again, this is really an opportunity for our fellows to get some really invaluable experiences before they actually enter the Foreign Service. For both of these internships, the program provides up to $10,000 in support, and that comes in the form of airfare to and from their location. So if folks aren't based in DC, we will fly them to DC for the internship. Same with the overseas internship, we will fly them to and from the U.S. consulate or embassy where they are based. We will also provide a stipend to the fellow and housing. It will, and we also provide support for housing during the domestic internship. And then during the overseas internship, the consulate or embassy where the students are doing their internships will provide housing. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Our fellows also receive mentorship all throughout the program from a senior level Foreign Service officer. So the goal here is really to get folks paired with someone early on, either in their career track or working in or who have had experiences that are of interest to the fellow, to provide some guidance along the way during the course of their graduate program, and then ultimately after they enter the Foreign Service. These are senior level Foreign Service officers that we're pairing our fellows with, so they have a range of experiences and insight that they can provide fellows as our Pickering Fellows are looking to select career tracks and look at other opportunities as they're getting into graduate school. And so finally, the program does culminate in employment with the State Department's Foreign Service for those who successfully complete the program and meet the Foreign Service entry requirements in accordance with applicable law and State Department policy. And I'll get into a little bit about what that means after we talk about some of the benefits. So again, the benefits, just to break down the benefits a little bit more in terms of numbers, we provide up to $21,500 per year for the 2-year master's program towards tuition and mandatory fees. There is a $16,000 per year living stipend during those 2 years of the fellows graduate program, and then professional development all throughout their experience with the fellowship. So during orientation, our fellows are certainly getting a lot of professional development during the week that they're here, but also during the domestic internship, we are consistently doing professional development training opportunities with former retired and current Foreign Service officers who can provide insight into the skills and expectation, the skills that Foreign Service officers need, and then the expectations for the type of career opportunities, and essentially looking at the career that they're embarking on in the Foreign Service. For each of the summers, we can provide up to $10,000 for the domestic and overseas internships for each of those. And then just to mention here, our program also has cultivated relationships with a number of institutions, graduate schools around the country, focused on international affairs, public policy, public administration, that have agreed to provide additional funding to supplement our fellows' experiences at their graduate programs. A complete list of the graduate school partners is located on our website. We are constantly updating the offers from our partner institutions. So if you are interested in learning more about what the specific offers are from the universities that we've partnered with, you can email us, and we will get you a list of those offers, as well as the contact information for the individuals that you might want to be touching base with to learn more about the programs. And again, we are working really diligently as staff to make sure that our fellows have a number of different opportunities along the way, and the additional funding support for our partner institutions is one of those things. I will mention here, though, that we do not require that our fellows go to partner institutions that are listed on the website. Fellows are eligible to take their funding with them to almost any graduate program focused on the areas of relevance that we talked about earlier with them. So they are not beholden to attend the partner institutions that are listed on the website. In addition to the benefits that our fellows receive as being part of the Pickering Fellowship Program, there are also a number of obligations that they're required to obtain and maintain throughout their course with the program, as well as during their time in the Foreign Service. And the first portion of that includes medical security and suitability clearances. So at the time that our fellows are being interviewed for the program, at the time that our applicants are being interviewed for the program, we begin the security clearance process. And what that looks like is and I'll stay with the security clearance process for a minute, is really a comprehensive background investigation on the candidates. And the State Department does this in cooperation with other federal, state, and local agencies. It is really an intensive process, which is part of the reason why we leave lots of time for that, for our fellows to go through the security process, and why we start so early during the finalist interviews. Some of the things that could be factors in whether or not someone's able to obtain security clearance, a top-level security clearance, top-secret security clearance level, might include problems with credit or bankruptcy, problems in employment records, not failing to meet tax obligations, and then drug and alcohol use, and perhaps even honorable discharge from less than honorable discharge from the armed forces. There are, and I'll stay on the topic of drug use in particular. In the past several years, we've seen waves of states moving to declassify certain drugs, particularly marijuana, as a recreational rather than a violation of the law. But the federal government still sees that use as breaking the law. So what we generally suggest to applicants is that if you think that if you have used in the past recently, or even up to the last 18 months, now may not be the best time to apply, because you will not be able to obtain your security clearance if you have used within the last year to 18 months. So if you are currently using, we recommend that you stop, and then in the next year, look to come back and then apply to the program. Again, this is a really big area of concern for the department, and we want to be clear about the expectations about what may and may not come up during the security clearance process. So if you have used, again, last time, consider not applying this year and stopping now and then continuing with the application process in subsequent application cycles. In addition to the security clearance, folks are also required to meet medical clearance requirements. And what that means is that you're able to serve worldwide. As a part of the Foreign Service, our Foreign Service officers do serve everywhere in the world. And that means being able to be in a physical state where you're able to do that. That does not mean that if you have a chronic illness or other disability that you are ineligible for meeting the medical clearance requirements. It just means that there might be some levels of restriction on where you can go or where you might be able to serve. So, for example, if you have a chronic illness that requires a prescription that you have to take on a regular basis that is not accessible in a specific country or region, that might determine the level of medical clearance that you receive. Again, that does not preclude you from applying to the program or even getting a medical clearance. It's just something that is important to consider as you're going through and meeting the requirements of the program. In addition to the medical and security clearances, there is also a suitability clearance, and this is unique to our Foreign Service Officer Generalists. Because our Foreign Service officers are serving as diplomats of the United States overseas, they are very much representing the United States during their work hours and after. So if something happens outside of work hours that calls attention to a particular Foreign Service officer, and they make news, for example, the news headline will not say American citizen, it will say U.S. diplomat. So if there is anything in your past that might be particularly problematic that might come up, that could come up during the suitability clearance. Again, this is really looking for fit with the Department of State. You are, as a Foreign Service officer, you're representing the United States 24 hours a day. So we want to make sure that our Foreign Service officers are the best representation of the United States overseas. If you do have questions about suitability clearance, security clearances, or medical clearances, on our website we have in our fellowship obligations page some more robust details about what that means. You can also check out the State Department's diplomatic security page, and they have lined out pretty in a very substantial detail things that they consider during all of these processes. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us about that as well. In addition to the clearances, our fellows are also required to maintain a GPA of 3.2 throughout the program. Because we are funding your graduate level studies, we expect that you are also maintaining high academic quality during the time that you're enrolled. Our fellows are also required to meet all of the State Department's Foreign Service Officer entry requirements. So this includes taking the Foreign Service Officer written exam and completing and passing the Foreign Service Officer oral assessment. And during the time that our fellows are with the program, we do provide guidance and training on how to prepare for those the exam and the oral assessment. And again, we pair folks with mentors so that as they are getting prepared to go into the assessments, they can also think through some of the criteria and skills that the Board of Examiners will be looking for as they're going through their oral assessment tests. And I will actually come back to talk a little bit more about the 13 dimensions and how that fits into here. If you haven't heard of the 13 dimensions, I'll just speak about it briefly, but there are some additional resources on the State Department's website about what we look for in Foreign Service officers. And then there is an obligation to work for at least 5 years in the State Department after completing the Graduate Fellowship Program. And so our fellows are expected to serve for those 5 years, at least those 5 years in the department after they're done. We have lots of folks who are still remain in the Foreign Service and really enjoy the work that they do. And I think that might also be a good transition into the next slide, where we'll talk about what Foreign Service officers do. So our Pickering Fellows go on to become Foreign Service officers with Department of State. And being Foreign Service officers is really rewarding career because you're active and engaged in a whole lot of different and interesting projects and activities. So our Foreign Service officers are really leading the discussion on the U.S. foreign policy when it comes to diplomatic advocacy and foreign assistance related discussions. And they are really advancing U.S. interests and the interests of the American people, their safety and their economic prosperity around the world. These folks are the ones who serve at and make sure that embassies and consulates around the world are running and have their doors open to American citizens who might need help as they're traveling overseas, or to folks who are looking to come and visit in the United States. They do public diplomacy efforts where they go out into schools and talk about educational opportunities in the United States. They are the ones who are making sure that the embassies are running smoothly so that those operations can happen. They're really doing a lot. And they are coordinating with lots of different agencies, and no one day's work is the same as the next day. So one of the things that you'll often hear Foreign Service officers talk about is how exciting and challenging and really rewarding the assignments are that they do. So Foreign Service officers generally serve for 2 to 3 years overseas and at a embassy, consulate, or diplomatic post. And because of the constant rotations, you're constantly engaged in different types of projects and works. You're constantly meeting people and doing really neat and interesting things, while also very much serving the interests of the U.S. overseas. So the work is really rewarding, and we find that is really what attracts people to the Pickering program. So now that we've talked a little bit about the program and the details about what that means being a Pickering Fellow, let's talk about the application process. So the application process will start with the eligibility requirements. All applicants at the time of applying to the program must be U.S. citizens, have a cumulative GPA of a 3.2 on a 4.0 scale, and seeking enrollment to a 2-year master's program in the fall of 2019 in a field of study relevant to the U.S. Foreign Service. So we'll start with the first one, U.S. citizenship. You have to have U.S. citizenship at the time that you're applying to the program. For better or worse, we're not able to take permanent residence. So if you're in the process of receiving your citizenship, wait until the point that you have your citizenship to apply to the program, and then you will be eligible to apply. U.S. citizenship can also be through naturalization. So you'll see that as one of the requirements for the application materials, we'll ask for proof of citizenship, and that can be either your passport, your birth certificate, or your certificate of naturalization. You must also have a cumulative GPA of a 3.2. So we will either look at your undergraduate cumulative GPA on the transcripts from your undergraduate degree, or a combination of a weighted GPA between courses that you may have taken at your primary undergraduate institution and any other institutions that you attended for more than a year. So we get the question a lot as to whether or not we can round up. If you have less than a 3.2, we are not able to consider your application during the application period for the program. We also get the question a lot as to whether or not maybe I had a 3.1 in undergrad, but I've been out for 12 years working and gaining experience. And the question is really, can work experience be considered in place of the GPA, and unfortunately we can't. The GPA is a hard and fast requirement. And then we will also ask you about the types of programs that you're applying to in the application process. So we are looking for folks who are starting their 2-year master's program in the fall of 2019. If you are currently enrolled at an institution or plan to enroll in classes for the fall of 2018, you are unfortunately ineligible to apply. And again, it must be a 2-year master's program, so we are not able to fund joint degree programs where that would last for more than 2 years. We are not able to fund law degree programs, often because they're 3-year programs, but also because the curriculum is very specific. And again, when we're talking about the types of degrees that we're looking to fund, we're looking for international affairs, business administration, public administration. Like I had mentioned in the previous slide, foreign service officers are doing a lot of general work, project management, operations, public diplomacy efforts, communications, economic-based analysis if you become an econ officer. So the types of programs that we're looking to fund would fall generally in line with the 5 career tracks that foreign service officers are pursuing, whether that be, and I will just list them, the 5 different career tracks: public diplomacy, consular, management, economics, and political. So the State Department has a whole number of resources that outline what those career tracks look like and what the sort of day-to-day looks like for those officers. Look at those and determine whether or not the types of programs, master's programs you're looking at fall in line with that. So what are we looking for in terms of documentation for the application? Really the nitty-gritty of the application, what are we looking for? So we asked for a lot of information. The first of which is a 600-word personal statement that is essentially telling us why you're a good match for the Pickering Fellowship as well as a good match for the Foreign Service. So in the personal statement, we're really looking for a narrative about who you are and what brought you to this point that you're applying to this fellowship program, and how does this fit into what you hope to achieve in your long-term career goals. We do not expect you to have a level of commitment to career tracks at the time that you're applying, although if you do have them, you are welcome to include that in your personal statement. But the personal statement is really an area for our selection panel to get to know you and know how you fit into this program in the larger Foreign Service. Our program also requires quite a bit of information about financial need. Financial need is something that we are formally considering during the application process, and we give you an additional 400 words to contextualize what your current financial need is and why you're looking for funding for your graduate program specifically. And I'm going to hop around just a little bit in this bullet point list. In addition to the statement of financial need, we're also asking for financial aid information, specifically the student aid report that's generated by FAFSA. If you have been out of school for some time, if you graduated and you do not have a current student aid report, we are asking that you still complete a FAFSA application for this academic cycle so that our selection committee has an idea of your current financial need status. In addition to that, we are also, if you received aid during your undergraduate years, and you still have the financial aid award letter from your senior year, we ask that you upload that as well if you have it. This is not required in part because we realize that some of the folks who are applying to the program have been out for some time, may not have access to that, or you may not have received aid during your senior year. We will also ask for your proof of citizenship, which I mentioned briefly earlier, and then we will also ask for 2 letters of recommendation. We're looking for a faculty or instructor, and then 1 from a community leader. So what does that mean? Because we are funding your graduate studies, we do need one of your recommenders, to be able to talk about your your potential to succeed academically. So it should come from a faculty member or an instructor, someone who can talk to your potential to succeed in a full-time graduate level program. The community leader can be someone who knows you well, who knows your work, maybe your work ethic, your commitment to public service, someone who can speak more robustly about who you are as a person, and give us a more holistic view of who you are as an applicant. In addition to those items, we also require transcripts from all of the colleges or universities that you've attended, and any institution that you've listed on your application in the institution section of the application. If you've listed it there, we will also require a transcript to be included in your application. This year, there is a little bit difference because of the advanced deadline. We are not requiring the GRE or GMAT scores. These are optional. If you've taken the GRE or GMAT, you are welcome to upload those scores, but not having them will not preclude you from being considered from the program, assuming that you meet all the rest of the eligibility requirements. All of these materials need to be submitted and completed using our online portal by September 20th so that you can be considered in our selection process. So let's talk about the fellowship timeline a little bit. The application is currently open. It's been open since mid-June, and it will close at midnight on September 20th. All material, your personal statement, all of supplemental material is required to be in by that September 20th deadline. At that point, we will then go through and evaluate the applications for basic eligibility requirements, and we'll send those off to our selection panels, who will be reviewing until about mid-October. Sometime on the week of the 25th, we will bring them together to deliberate, and at the end of that week, our 60 finalists will be selected, and we will notify everybody at that point whether or not they've received an invitation to become a finalist, or if they have received an alternate position for the finalist interviews. And then the interviews will take place in November 15th and 16th, which is a Thursday and a Friday. We will fly our finalists out to Washington, D.C. to stay the night before the interview date that you're scheduled to have. We'll fly you out, we'll put you in a hotel, and then we will have an intensive day-long interview process where our candidates will go through an interview with the selection panel that reviewed their applications, and engage in a writing exercise. The writing exercise is a timed exercise, and we encourage anybody who's applying to the program who has been selected as a finalist to really practice sitting down and going through a writing prompt and responding to a writing prompt to again be prepared for what it is that they will be engaging in during those interviews on the 15th and 16th. After that time, we will select our 30 fellows. We will try to do so on the night of the 16th, but if not, definitely that Monday of the 19th is the latest that we will notify folks whether or not they've been selected as fellows. And then again, the orientation for next year's class will be in early June 2019, and that will last for a week. So what are some of the characteristics of a Pickering Fellow? And I mentioned earlier on the 13 dimensions that the State Department has, and that is a really good guide for thinking more broadly about the types of skills and that our selection panel is looking for in candidates. Some other ways that you might think about this are our Pickering Fellows are passionate. They're dedicated to public service. They want to be representatives of the U.S. Government overseas, and they have expressed that in their applications and in the activities that they've been engaged in. In the application, there's a section to highlight your achievements and contributions to service, and we find that many of our fellows have lots of either volunteer or work experience that has demonstrated their commitment to public service. They are also internationally focused. Our fellows will eventually become foreign service officers, and successful candidates have communicated that they've done their research. They know that the life of a foreign service officer is very much internationally oriented, where you are changing posts, changing countries, changing scenery, changing jobs every few years. So they are committed to an internationally focused career. They're flexible, they're culturally sensitive, and they're resilient. Again, because you're moving around so much in the Foreign Service, it requires a level of adaptability and sensitivity to environments and people that are different than you. You're constantly meeting and interacting with new folks, and as if you have been through a moving process, you know that sometimes you'll run into bumps along the way. So having a resilient character is also something very indicative of Pickering Fellows and Foreign Service officers in general. They appreciate being challenged. So I mentioned earlier that the career of a Foreign Service officer is very much engaging with challenging situations and projects all the time. And that's something that is really rewarding about the career. And one of the things about the career, again, that is really unique is that you can see the tangible difference that that you make in the world. And our Pickering Fellows are definitely interested in doing that and passionate about that. So these are just a couple of things that we wanted to highlight that you might consider touching on as you're thinking about how to craft your narrative about who you are. So a couple of tips for crafting a competitive application. One of the top ones is just to make sure that you're eligible. Again, we talked a little bit about the GPA requirements and seeking enrollment into a graduate program during the fall of 2019. Be sure that you meet all of the basic eligibility requirements when you're applying. The last thing that's helpful it's not helpful for you if you apply and you think, oh well, I'm going to give it my best shot anyway, even if you may not meet the GPA requirement. We would hate for you to spend all of your time putting your time and effort into the application if you may not meet the basic eligibility requirements. The personal statement, again, make sure that you're highlighting your motivations for applying to this particular program. What is it about the Pickering Fellowship? What is it about the Foreign Service that has really attracted you to this point where you want to work in this area? And then highlighting the experiences and examples of things that you've encountered in your background that align with those. What types of activities have you been involved with that have challenged you, that have pushed you, and made you realize that you want a career that will challenge and engage you in that kind of way. Highlight your honors and awards, any extracurricular activities. If you've made the Dean's List, put it there. If you have received a scholarship award, or if you've been a leader in a campus activity or student group, or even on your job, mention those things. These are all things that, again, will highlight to the committee the type of work that you've been involved with. And one of the questions that we often get is, well, I had to work to put myself through school, so I really only may have had work experience at the local grocery store or the local food restaurant down the street. Should I include that information? And yes, you absolutely should, especially if you've taken on leadership in those positions, if you've had to manage people or budgets or money or that kind of thing. Again, Foreign Service officers are constantly engaging with people. Customer service is certainly something that you could highlight in those experiences as well. And again, because we're funding a 2-year master's program, we're looking for folks who have academically excelled in their undergraduate careers. So highlighting in as many ways as you can your academic achievements will be really important. Our selection committee will be looking through your transcripts as well, so that will come out in the transcripts. But anywhere you can include ways that you've been successful in the classroom is also important. Recommendations are really important in the application process to the Pickering program. If we're looking at 2 candidates that are very similar in terms of qualifications, and we see that one has 2 really well written, strong letters of recommendation, and the other has one that's really strong and another one that's kind of lukewarm, just a little bit generic. The one with the 2 strong letters of recommendation is going to be looked at more favorably, in part because, again, they're helping contribute to your narrative. And the one thing that I like to tell applicants is to think about your entire application as a cohesive story. So what you're saying in your personal statement is also matched by what you're including in terms of your academic achievements and work highlights, and then also uh, 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 so in short, recommendations are important. Um, uh, we mentioned that financial need is something that we consider formally in the application process, and that's something that is also a tip to creating a competitive application. We provide you the space to give to provide our selection committee more context about what your financial situation is at the time that you're applying, and we would certainly encourage you to do that, to let the committee know why is it that you're applying for this particular graduate school grant that will help you pay for your graduate education, and what does that mean to you to receive the assistance. Um, and this is a really simple one. Proofread and review all of the statements that you have. There's nothing more distracting than having multiple spelling and grammatical errors throughout the personal statement that takes away from the narrative that you're trying to craft. If someone's focusing on the misspellings, they may not be focusing as much on the content. So make sure you have at least one person, but preferably one or two people reviewing your statements to make sure that you haven't missed anything. So that concludes the formal presentation for the fellowship program. We're happy to respond to questions at any point in the application process. We recognize that there have been some changes to the timeline of the application process, and can certainly appreciate the questions that come along with that. So please feel free to reach out to us at Pickering Fellowship at howard.edu. Visit our website at pickeringfellowship.org, and let us know how we can be of assistance to you. Thank you again for taking a couple minutes out of your time to sit with us, and we look forward to receiving your application.